The South China Sea has been a bargaining chip in China's pocket since the beginning of its rise in the global order. Here, Beijing operates from a position of strength, with physical control over critical islands. Possession of these gives Beijing a clear upper hand and the ability to exert strategic authority over these waters, regardless of the rights and interests of other neighboring nations. The South China Sea, it's a name which conjures a slew of complex territorial disputes that have been the reason behind conflict and tension in the region. And, across the Indo-Pacific, has a long history that stretches from Japan's occupation of the South China Sea Islands after World War II to present-day speculation that it could spark a global conflict. This begs the question why it is the world's most heavily contested stretch of sea. In any case, according to United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, maritime transport accounts from roughly 80% of global trade volume and 70% of global trade value. 60% of that tonnage is transported by water, with the South China Sea carrying an estimated 1/3 of global trade. With all of this, it is believed to move of $3.37 trillion in trade each year, making this length the second busiest sea lane. Not only that, but the region possesses proven oil reserves of approximately 7.7 billion barrels, with an estimated total 28 billion barrels. The overall amount of natural gas reserves is expected to be roughly 266 trillion cubic feet. Because of all these economic benefits, the water corridors of the South China Sea are incredibly essential for China, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea. Malaysia, the Philippines, Brunei, and others, as they all rely on the Malacca Strait, which connects the South China Sea and by extension the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Additionally, the regional power, which can project martial power in the area, will have economic advantages as well, turning the area into a geopolitical pivot for dominating the Asia. The military perspective in the region. Because of how strategically important the sea is, an age-old adage can be squarely applied to explain the situation. It is unsurprising that the region is a source of massive global strife. This brings us to the discussion concerning the military activities in the region. Since China announced its expansive sovereignty claims in the South China Sea in 2009, the region has become steadily militarized, as Beijing seeks to legitimize and defend its claims. Other key maritime counter-claimants within the Association of Southeast Asian Nations including, most notably Vietnam, but also Indonesia, Malaysia, and the Philippines, have sought to modernize their naval and coast guard capabilities to preserve the status quo in the SCS. And major powers outside of the region, including Australia, France, India, Japan, take the form of periodic joint exercises, freedom of navigation operations, or both, to uphold international law and rules of behavior. But describing the situation and considering force buildup in the South China Sea, China has been the most active by all reasonable indicators, such as quantity and quality of weapons deployed, land reclaimed, and military facilities constructed or upgraded on disputed outposts. The claims. And, when it comes to the ever-important topic of claims, the most powerful player in this 3.6 million square kilometers sea, People's Republic of China, asserts that its rights are based on both the law of the Sea Convention and the so-called 9-line. The current assertion by PRC lies in transforming uninhabited islands into artificial islands. Since 2010, in order to comply with United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, such as places like Haven Reef, Johnson South Reef, and Fiery Cross Reef, it is altering the physical land characteristics of the reefs. PRC has been able to change their size and structure. It has also built airstrips on the islands of Paracel and Spratly Islands. Such contradictory allegations have created fresh complications with US and Australia, both rejecting substantial portions of China's maritime claims in the South China Sea areas, as well as territorial claims by the state to underwater reefs. However, this now brings us to the point of concern: India's place in the matter. So, let's talk about India's position on the South China Sea and how important it is for India. Over the past decade, China has been using coercion on four major fronts, that is, in the East China Sea, South China Sea, China-India border, and toward the US, on the question of freedom of navigation. Of these, only the border conflict impacts India directly. However, the significance of the South China Sea in emerging geopolitical equations cannot be overlooked anymore. China's growing power to determine and expand its involvement in the SCS has prompted India to reconsider its foreign policy on the matter. As part of the Act East policy, India has been internationalizing issues in the Indo-Pacific area in order to counter China's threatening actions in the region. India's role in the South China Sea is fourfold. First, naval deployments. Second, increasing strategic military links with littoral states like Singapore, Indonesia, the Philippines, and Vietnam. Third, economic involvement of Indian energy companies in South China Sea waters. And fourth, discussions between India and other regional and extra-regional China-concerned powers about the South China Sea. India's involvement in the South China Sea represents a new development in its Look East policy. A new balancing factor in the interplay of actors within these waters, and a new friction factor within India-China relations. In the South China Sea, India too has deployed its naval assets to guard Sea of Lines communication, denying PRC's position to impose itself. PRC, however, sees these activities as a containment effort. Apart from this, India is not a participant in the high-stakes battle for control over the seas. However, it would scarcely be an unaffected observer if the power structure in the region changes dramatically. Nearly $200 billion in Indian trade passes through the South China Sea. Thousands of Indian citizens study, work, and are otherwise heavily invested in the Association of Southeast Asian Nations countries. Thus, it is an area of strategic importance for India. And if PRC gets unrivaled control over these waterways, it will upend a significant portion of the current commercial and geopolitical order. Access to Southeast Asia's key waterways, as well as the need to enhance capacity in ASEAN member nations, are crucial considerations for Indian policymakers. Both are essential components of New Delhi's Indo-Pacific strategy. In other words, India must find ways to play its cards right, so that it can leverage these disputed waters when the time comes to hold Beijing to account for its brazen border breaches and other transgressions.